meetings, and it would kind of like keep her normalized.
All right, welcome everybody. Hello. Thank you guys so much for joining. It is 11:59 currently, and we will get started at noon. We'll just have a few more people, I'm sure, popping in and attending with us. Welcome. We will get started promptly at noon. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining. It is noon. We will go ahead and get started. First off, I would just like to thank Bronson HelpNet for the invite to provide this webinar to you all today on October 29th. It is noon, and today's session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Bronson Help YouTube channel. So if you would like to rewatch in the future or share this with another person, friend, family member that you think would benefit from the information on the DASH diet, that is where you will be able to find the recording today. So again, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Tina Guajardo. I am a registered dietitian and health educator with Bronson Community Health Advancement, and I'm so excited to be able to offer you this presentation and overview on the DASH diet. So let's get started. So first off, you may see in your chat a poll that asks you the question, are you currently following the DASH diet? And whether you see that in the poll or not, go ahead and answer that. If you don't see it in the poll and you just want to go over to the chat and say yes, no, sometimes I'm following it, or you know what, I really don't even know what the DASH diet is, so I know I'm definitely not following it at this point in time, just go ahead and share with me where you're at in this. Just I like to know where everybody is at and what they're following right now when it comes to their nutrition intake. So I'm seeing you guys answering in the chat. Thank you so much. And it looks like so far we've got some answers for not sure. Most of you are saying no, not currently following the DASH diet. Somebody is trying to, so hopefully today's session will be able to give you some guidance and confidence in being able to follow this DASH diet. And then it looks like some of you guys are saying sometimes, so that makes sense too. And just as a reminder, if you're just joining in, please make sure that you are muted so we can decrease any background noises today. All right, well, thank you again so much for sharing that question. So what are our goals for our time together today? Well, we are going to do a few things. First, I want us to take a minute to just review what high blood pressure is, the different categories of blood pressure that you may be able to, sorry, I just changed my screen. Can you guys still see my screen? Really? I cannot see it. Sorry, guys. Give me just a minute to see if I can figure out how to get my screen back.
Did your view change?
Yes, all I see is a blank screen and then all of the participants on my right-hand side.
Hmm. Well, if it's easier because we don't really know what's going on, you could stop sharing your screen and then just start again. Maybe that'll fix it. All right. Looks good on our side. Can you see it?
Yes, thank you
Okay.
so much.
Welcome.
All right, thank you guys for your patience during that. So, what are we going to accomplish in today's session today? So, as I mentioned, we are going to just kind of go over what high blood pressure is, some different facts about high blood pressure, and then those different categories of blood pressure ranges. Second, I want to review some of those basics of what the DASH diet is. But really, what I want you to be able to do is take away at least 3 different new ways to use the DASH diet in your eating, whether it be your meals or your snacks, whether you're dining out, you're at home, you're at work. I want you to have at least 3 new ways that you can incorporate the DASH diet into your daily life. And then, as always, I want to be able to leave you with some additional resources to learn more about the DASH diet, but also be able to find some DASH diet recipes. So that is our goal for today's session. So let's start out by just kind of talking about hypertension and what it is. So let's start by talking about some facts. So hypertension, which is also referred to, more commonly maybe as high blood pressure, is one of the major risk factors for heart disease. And unfortunately, half of Americans have high blood pressure and may not even know about it. So maybe you have heard of high blood pressure being referred as the silent killer. It's often referred to as the silent killer because sometimes we're living with high blood pressure and yet there are no signs and symptoms of it. Unfortunately, in living with high blood pressure, it can lead to some potential complications. So it is important to make sure that you're getting your blood pressure checked at your healthcare provider on a fairly regular basis. So what is high blood pressure? Well, high blood pressure happens when the force or the pressure of your blood pushing up against the walls of your blood vessels is too high. And when that pressure or that force on those blood vessels is too high, it can unfortunately lead to kind of the weakening of those blood vessels. And that's what kind of tends to cause those long-term complications. Some unfortunate consequences of uncontrolled high blood pressure are complications like stroke, vision loss, maybe heart failure, or even chronic kidney disease. High blood pressure does tend to be diagnosed in stages. So the American Heart Association provides this handy guide as to the different stages of blood pressure. And this is color coded just like a stoplight, right? So green means go, that is good. In that column there that you're seeing from the American Heart Association that is green, that is normal blood pressure, meaning the top number of the reading from your blood pressure or the systolic, which measures your blood pushing against the artery walls when the heart is beating. If that number is less than 120, then that is a normal blood pressure. For the bottom number, your lower number, also referred to as the diastolic number, which measures the blood pressure that is pressing up against the artery walls while the heart muscle rests in between beats. If that lower number is less than 80, then that also is considered to be a normal blood pressure. So, summary, American Heart Association recommends that a normal blood pressure be less than 120 for the top, less than 80 for the bottom number. And as you can see, again, just kind of going based upon that stop sign, stop light type of category, we get some yellow flags and some red flags when it comes to our blood pressure. So when we start having like a yellow flag, it's giving us an indicator that our blood pressure is starting to creep up. It's getting a little high. It's now in that elevated category. And the American Heart Association defines that anything that is between 120 and 129 for the top number, but still less than 80 for the bottom number. That is, we've got that yellow flag, it is elevated. We have to start paying attention to the blood pressure. And then from there, high blood pressure can get staged in stage 1, 2, and then 3, or hypertensive crisis. So that's really anything over 130, and then anything over 80 really starts to get staged as a high blood pressure, stage 1, stage 2, or hypertensive crisis. So again, that is available from the American Heart Association on their website, heart.org, if you would like to print out a copy for yourself. Now, there are many different lifestyle changes that impact our blood pressure. The one that we're going to focus on mostly is our diet. And I don't say diet in a restrictive way, but diet in the sense of what we consume on a regular day-to-day basis. But our blood pressure can be more affected than just by our diet alone, although that does play a big role. Our blood pressure can also be impacted by alcohol intake. And so alcohol, we know, can increase our blood pressure, and it is recommended that if you are currently drinking alcohol, men should have no more than 2 drinks per day, and women should have no more than 1 drink per day. Again, if we can eliminate alcohol intake, that would be best. But if you're not currently taking in any alcohol, we do not recommend to start for any health benefits in particular. Additionally, our physical activity can play a role in decreasing our blood pressure, along with how we manage stress. Whether we do manage stress or we don't manage stress, that can impact our blood pressure too. And then whether we are using tobacco products or using a vape, smoking can also increase our blood pressure. Our body weight can impact our blood pressure. And then, of course, any prescriptions that we are or are not taking that are prescribed by our doctor can also play a role in our overall blood pressure as well. So, since I just mentioned stress, I want to hear from you guys. And you don't have to answer this in the poll. You might see that in the chat, but I'm just going to leave this open-ended as a chat question. So again, go to your chat and answer the question, what do you do to manage stress? So what are you currently doing to manage stress? Go ahead and type that in the chat for us. All right, so I'm seeing a couple of answers come into the chat. Thank you. This is good for other people to see as well when you're providing this feedback, because somebody might say, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. I might start considering that for myself in managing stress. So some of the answers that I'm seeing, really good ones. Some people are doing some deep breathing exercises or meditation. Quite a few actually are going for a walk or doing exercise. That can be a really good form of stress management. Sleep, yes, maybe. Reading a good book, playing some music, and then, yeah, maybe creating some boundaries, somebody says, staying away from others that are causing the stress, setting those boundaries. So good suggestions there when it comes to being able to manage that stress in a healthy way so we can do good things for our blood pressure. All right, so let's move on. And we've done an overview of some of the lifestyle and impacts or factors that impact our blood pressure, but now we're going to focus mostly on diet for the rest of our time together. So that is why you are all here, for the DASH diet information. So let's start out by just defining what DASH even stands for. So you may have caught on already that the DASH diet is specific to blood pressure, hypertension. And so DASH stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And maybe in the past, if you or somebody you know has been diagnosed with high blood pressure, maybe your provider has asked you to start following the DASH diet. And that is because the DASH diet is often recommended recommended for people that either want to, stop their high blood pressure, right? Reverse their high blood pressure, or maybe you're kind of borderline high blood pressure, or maybe high blood pressure potentially runs in the family. Then DASH diet is also recommended for individuals that want to prevent the diagnosis of high blood pressure. If you've learned in the past about even the Mediterranean diet, in my opinion, I feel like the DASH diet is quite similar to the Mediterranean diet in the types of foods that it promotes in this eating plan. But some people like the DASH diet a little bit better because it can provide some more concrete guidelines as far as like how many recommended servings to eat, or how much sodium should I be trying to stay under. So a little bit more specific guidelines with the DASH diet. And that is one of the primary differences to the Mediterranean style diet, but they're both very good and healthy choices. So what does the DASH diet focus on? Well, again, very similar to the Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet is really focused on looking at your overall eating pattern and really focusing on balanced, heart healthy food choices to build our meals and snacks around. The DASH diet encourages a lot of whole grains, fruits and vegetables, lean protein, and also low-fat dairy choices. While it encourages the limited intake of choices that would have a lot of added sugars, high saturated fat foods, because we know that those two categories specifically are not good choices for heart health overall. And then when it comes to the DASH diet and having or maybe living with a high blood pressure diagnosis, you've probably been told to watch your sodium. So the DASH diet recommends some guidelines on how much sodium to try to be staying under. At the top tier with the DASH diet, their first recommendation is to limit sodium to less than 2,300 milligrams per day. But oftentimes, some people may need to even take that a little bit further. Again, so the second tier or the lower recommendation for sodium on the DASH diet may be closer to 1,500 milligrams of sodium per day. Again, I want to encourage you all to hear this information, make notes, rewatch this recording, but use this information to help you have conversations with your provider. So you can say, I went to this class, they were talking about the DASH diet, they were recommending 2,300, they were recommending 1,500 milligrams of sodium. What do you think is the right amount of sodium for me in my diagnosis and my overall health condition? So these are guidelines. Again, use this as a conversation talking point with your primary care provider, whoever might be managing your high blood pressure if you're currently living with that. So, the U.S. News and World Report has voted the DASH diet as the number 2 best overall diet in the year 2024. With number 1 being the Mediterranean diet, which, as I mentioned, which makes them quite similar. DASH diet was also ranked number 2 best diet in the categories of the best heart healthy diet, the best diet for bone and joint health, and the best diabetes diet. So if you're here in the class today and you're saying, I'm living with more than just high blood pressure, but I'm thinking about my overall heart health, I'm thinking about how, I'm getting older and I got to think about keeping my bones strong, or maybe I am looking at a potential diabetes diagnosis, or I am currently living with diabetes too, please know that the DASH diet is also beneficial in all of those categories as well. So, how does the DASH diet work? So in the previous slide, I had mentioned that the DASH diet encourages a lot of whole grains, fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, and low fat and dairy. Those particular food groups provide our body with a lot more calcium, potassium, and magnesium, including fiber. So those four nutrients, vitamin, minerals are four categories that we see encouraged quite often on the DASH diet. Potassium specifically, and you're going to see that I'm going to kind of go through today's session and what I feel is the most important order to perform any changes when it comes to the DASH diet. And so you're going to hear me talk about sodium first, and then we're going to move on in our conversation and be talking about potassium. So potassium is recommended to choose more often on the DASH diet for a number of different reasons. So again, usually when you're diagnosed with high blood pressure, maybe your provider has told you to reduce your sodium, your salt intake. That is number one. Yes. Number two on the DASH diet is also to increase your potassium choices for a number of reasons, including potassium can work hand in hand in reducing the effect that salt or sodium has on our body. We also know that the more potassium that we eat from our food choices, the more sodium that we lose through our urination. And potassium can also help ease tension on those blood vessel walls that we were talking about that can help lower our blood pressure. But keep in mind, some of you in the room today may not be suitable for that increase in potassium that I am going to speak on today. So if you have been told in the past to follow more of a potassium restricted diet, whether that be for maybe a condition such as chronic kidney disease, again, please take these recommendations and use them as a talking point with your provider at your next doctor's appointment. So DASH diet encourages more calcium, potassium, magnesium, and fiber while also working on decreasing our sodium because we know that directly impacts and increases our blood pressure, but also decreasing our saturated fat intake, especially from like butters, creams, and fatty cuts of meat, because that saturated fat can increase our cholesterol levels and increase our risk of heart disease. So before we move on to talking about sodium, then a little bit further, I want to hear from you guys again. So in the chat, type, what is your favorite sodium-free seasoning? And there are so many out there that I cannot wait to hear what you guys come up with as your favorite sodium-free seasoning. Love that somebody says pepper. Absolutely. I love black pepper. Underrated and so good. So all herbs and spices, garlic powder, classic. Yes, pepper and garlic, Mrs. Dash. Thank you so much for throwing Mrs. Dash into the conversation. So many different sodium-free options. And they really have expanded a lot of their options too into like chili seasonings and taco seasonings, pre-mixed seasonings that are also low in sodium. Cayenne pepper, ooh, spicy, I like it. And Tabitha Brown spices. All right, I have not heard of Tabitha Brown spices, so I have learned something new to look into. So thank you guys so much for sharing your favorite sodium-free seasonings. So how much sodium is recommended? I've already kind of given some hints on this first, but actually where I would like to start in our conversation around sodium, and sometimes I get this answer when I ask that sodium-free seasoning question. Some people will say, like seasoning salts is their favorite salt-free seasoning, or like Himalayan salt is their favorite salt-free seasoning. And so I want to just take a step back here and remind us all that salt is salt. Okay, so none of you guys answered any salt containing herbs and spices or seasonings to use. So 2 thumbs up to that. But I do want to make the point that even if we are using different types of salts, like a sea salt or a pink Himalayan salt, all of that is still considered salt. Whether it be iodized, table salt, kosher salt, it is all salt. So salt is salt, and all of those options are going to contain sodium. We can even say that no matter the type of version of salt that we might be using in our food, 1 teaspoon of those salts, which is about the tip of your thumb. So just look at the tip of your thumb. That's about a 1 teaspoon representation. 1 teaspoon of salt has about 2,300 milligrams of sodium. So if we take a look at that information, and maybe we're looking and we're thinking to what we do at home on a regular basis, maybe we are adding some salt to our meals and snacks, at the table using that salt shaker, still keep in mind that that can add up quite quickly when we are adding salt in that way. So again, I mentioned that the initial recommended level of sodium intake on the DASH diet is to stay under 2,300 milligrams of sodium. Some of you guys might think, well, that seems kind of high still, but it can shockingly add up quite quickly. We do know from public health data that most Americans tend to eat more than 3,300 milligrams of sodium per day. So if you're on this journey of trying to do the DASH diet more often, I would recommend to you to do a little food journaling in the beginning to see how much sodium you are taking in on a daily basis, so you can see kind of what recommended level of salt to take in per day. Now realize that we can't follow a salt-free diet. That's not realistic. Our body actually does need some level of salt in our diet, or sodium in our diet, for proper function. But we also know that the American Heart Association says that 70% of sodium that we Americans do eat actually comes from packaged foods and not the salt shaker. So I find that always to be a bit surprising. A lot of times people will tell me, I'm good, I don't add any salt to my food. I'm not adding salt from the salt shaker. Keep in mind that a lot of our packaged foods do contain a lot of salt as well. So when we are looking at packaged foods, just knowing now kind of what our guidelines are for sodium, label reading is one very important and nifty tool to have in our back pocket when we are grocery shopping. So I just want to point out a couple of things in reading nutrition facts label, particularly for the DASH diet. We're going to go through these quite quickly here, but I want us all to take a look at number one, where it says serving information. When we are looking at a prepackaged box, can, whatever it may be, you're always going to want to look at what the serving size is. So on this label, our serving size is 1 cup of the product, and it is telling us that there are 4 servings in this package. So if we eat 2 cups of this food, whatever it might be, then we're going to have to double the nutrients that are down here in this yellow, gold, orange category. So just keep in mind that all of this nutrition facts information that is here in the gold is only for the 1 serving size. I'm not going to go through calories, but I want us now to take a look at sodium. So here under sodium, you can see that the amount represented in just 1 cup of this food choice is 850 milligrams of sodium, which, based upon a 2,000 calorie diet, equates to about 37% of our total sodium needs for the entire day. So now that you know that your guideline under the DASH diet is closer to like a 2,300 or maybe even a 1,500 milligram sodium level, you might look at that 850 and say, boy, that is a significant amount of sodium for just 1 cup of food. Let me see if I can find another packaged ingredient or food product that would provide me less sodium. The second thing that I want us to point out here is at the very bottom, underneath this black bolded line here, you can see some of your other nutrients, including your vitamins and minerals listed here as well. And so we're also starting to see more information on the potassium on the nutrition facts label. It's not always there, but it can be very helpful if you are trying to increase, or again, for some people, be mindful of a potassium restricted diet. So here on this example, we can see that 1 cup serving size is giving us 510 milligrams of potassium in just 1 cup. And so I look at that and say, boy, that's actually a really good source of potassium. How much potassium should we be having on the DASH diet, you might be asking? So the DASH diet actually recommends 4,700 milligrams of potassium per day, which is a much higher recommendation than just the general guidelines for most Americans. And I'll put that into comparison for you. So men over the age of 18, it is generally recommended to consume about 3,400 milligrams of potassium. And then for women over the age of 19, we should be consuming 2,600 milligrams of potassium per day, more if that person is pregnant or lactating. So you can see the difference. DASH diet recommends 4,700 milligrams per day of potassium. And that would be easy to achieve once we start looking at the recommended servings for each food group. So before we go on and start talking too much about potassium, let's finish up our conversation around sodium. And so again, we learned a little bit about doing the nutrition facts labels. If we are looking at packaged items, there are some indicators on the labeling that can give us some guidance on how much sodium is in the package. Whether we're looking at the nutrition facts label or not, some packaged items will be labeled things like salt or sodium free. So you know that if you were looking at a can of green beans and they say salt free, that is going to indicate to you that there is less than 5 milligrams of sodium per serving in those green beans. But some of these can be a little bit more deceiving. For instance, maybe we're looking at canned soups and it says something like low sodium or reduced sodium, or maybe just lightly salted, like the potato chips. Some of these definitions are here on your screen. So if something is categorized as lightly salted, what that means is that it has at least 50% less sodium than the original packaged product. So not all of those are good guidelines necessarily to follow, but it can give you some easy indicators if you are just doing a quick shopping trip, looking at the front of the package. But really, in the end, we should do our due diligence and turn that package around, looking at the back of the nutrition facts label so we can get those exact numbers of sodium and or potassium. Now this actually might be a little bit small on your screen, but this is just a visual depiction of what the DASH diet includes. And this is from the National Institutes of Health. You can find this on their website, nih.gov. /DASH. You can see that the DASH eating plan, again, encourages those same things that I was just referring to: our fruits and vegetables, our whole grains, our low-fat dairy, fish, Lean poultry like chicken and turkey, our beans like black beans, kidney beans, lentils, nuts and seeds, and then vegetable oils. More importantly, really the encouragement towards olive oil, which would be another comparison to the Mediterranean diet. So those are the types of foods to include. And now here are some just general recommendations as well. Again, based upon a 2000 calorie diet, how many servings of those food groups should I be aiming for every single day? So again, take a picture of this if you would like to, just for a quick reference for yourself in the future. This is saying that if you're following a 2000 calorie diet, you should be having 6 to 8 servings of grains per day. I won't go through each and one of these, but also 2 to 3 servings of a low-fat dairy choice. You're probably looking at this and saying, yeah, I mean, general recommendations for Americans is to be eating fruits, vegetables, grains. So what are the big differences? The biggest differences between the DASH diet and the dietary guidelines for Americans comes mostly in the vegetables, fruits, and grains serving. So the general recommendation for Americans is that we aim for 2.5 servings of vegetables per day. Well, you see here that the DASH diet is recommending 4 to 5 servings of vegetables per day. The dietary guidelines for Americans recommends 2 servings of fruits per day. Well, you can see here that the DASH diet recommends 4 to 5 servings of fruits per day. And then the dietary guidelines for Americans on the category of grains recommends 6 servings, with the DASH diet encouraging 6 to 8 servings of grains per day. So those are your biggest differences between just general recommendations and the DASH diet. A significant increase in fruits, vegetables, and our grain choices. And why fruits, vegetables, and grains? Because they tend to be low in sodium and they provide us more of those potassium sources that we need to, again, account for a reduction in the blood pressure. So natural next question would be well, what's a serving? So again, take a picture of this one if you would like as well. So here, this is just a breakdown to give you some examples. For example, let's say if I say 6 to 8 servings of grains per day, 1 serving would be something like a half a cup of a whole grain. Some whole grain options could be things like quinoa, maybe bulgur, tabbouleh, barley is a whole grain. So half a cup of a whole grain would be considered one of your 6 to 8 servings that is recommended on the DASH diet. If you are looking at things like vegetables, then 1 cup raw or half a cup cooked generally is a good recommendation for one of the 4 to 5 servings of vegetables that is recommended. If we go down and we look at that column that says, or that line item that says nuts, seeds, and legumes, that's nuts, seeds, lentils, and then again, all of our beans, not just green beans, but the black beans, the kidney beans, the pinto beans, those are recommended on a weekly basis and not necessarily a daily basis. So that is 4 to 5 servings of those per week. So that would be something like 1/3 of a cup of nuts as a snack choice is one of the servings of the 4 to 5 throughout the week that is goal. So you look at that low-fat, fat-free dairy line, and that's 2 to 3 daily servings of low-fat, fat-free dairy. Some of you in the room might not be using dairy for reasons, maybe personal reasons, or maybe a lactose intolerance. Keep in mind that your plant-based alternatives will be potassium sources as well, just not as rich in potassium, and I'll give you an example. So when it comes to cow's milk dairy, right, or cow's milk, 1 cup of milk is about 380 milligrams of potassium, whereas 1 cup of an almond milk is only about 170 milligrams of potassium. So still, you're getting potassium, just not quite as rich. So if you are choosing plant-based milk choices, keep in mind you may need to increase your potassium from other categories. And so I see the question, why the limitation on legumes? And I don't know if I would necessarily say, I do see what you're saying, where it looks like a smaller amount of legumes recommended in my opinion. And I think that when it comes to those protein sources like meat, poultry, and fish, your legumes can also qualify in those 6 or less daily servings of the meat or the protein choices. You could substitute with a legume. Legumes, like the black beans and the kidney beans, as I mentioned, it's generally about a half a cup. Serving of those legumes can qualify for one of the servings of your protein as well. So if you're following more of a plant-based diet, vegetarian, vegan, then you could substitute and have more legumes under that meat, poultry, fish section as well. That will only further increase your potassium and plant-based protein and fiber choices too. So I hope that clears that up. All right, so we've done a little work in looking at sodium. Now let's move on and start talking about potassium and some good sources there. So as I had made mention, our potassium recommendation under the DASH diet is about 4,700 milligrams of potassium on a daily basis. Again, if you're following a potassium restricted diet, please use that information to have a conversation with your provider. But here on this screen, I have got some really good rich sources of potassium from a majority of those categories that we were talking about to eat more of. So things like, yes, your white potato and your sweet potato, your dark green leafy vegetables. So think greens like mustard greens, kale, collards, our tomatoes, our winter squash. 'Tis the season for winter squash to come about, acorn and butternut, but also our summer squash like zucchini. And then of course our corn are good rich potassium sources to include on a regular basis in our meals and snacks. Our fruit potassium sources tend to be like our melons, cantaloupe, and honeydew. Bananas, of course, oranges, and then dried fruit falls into that category of a good rich potassium source just because it is concentrated and that water is removed and dried out there. And so then I want to, okay, so we talked about dairy a little bit. So then I've got a comment in the chat as well that I want to address when it comes to nuts, seeds, and legumes. So nuts and seeds are good potassium sources, but they really check off quite a number of health benefits, I'll say, right? So nuts and seeds not only provide us the potassium that we're talking about when it comes to our high blood pressure, but nuts and seeds also are a heart healthy choice because they're very rich in those unsaturated fats, which have been connected to being able to decrease our cholesterol levels if we're looking at other benefits to heart health and wanting to include those nuts and seeds. So the comment was nuts and seeds have the trade-off of being higher in fat. Yes. I just want to say that higher in fat component, not necessarily a negative thing by saying higher in fat, but higher in that good heart healthy fat. So if we are looking at weight management though, just keep in mind that higher fat, whether it is a good heart healthy choice or not, could potentially come with a few more calories. So again, those nuts and seeds in small quantities are a good choice to be used in our meals and snacks. And then fish, so salmon, halibut, tuna, snapper. We know that as a general recommendation for our heart health, again, the American Heart Association does recommend this, that we should be having those fatty fish choices like salmon and tuna 2 to 3 times per week as well. That is included as part of the DASH diet because they are a good source of potassium too. And so, and then the other comment was that corn doesn't have any nutritional value. And a lot of people will say that. Corn has that hard exterior that can be kind of tough for our body to digest and break down, but it is a good potassium source and can be used in combination with some of these other vegetables for our potassium sources. All right, so I tried to really kind of break down the DASH diet when it comes to the recommended categories of foods to include more often, how much of those categories to include on a daily basis. I want you to look at your food and your food choices and really kind of rank by importance the fact that we need to look at our sodium intake first, getting that under the recommended levels of the DASH diet, and then go a step further in looking at our potassium choices too. Those are the main components of the DASH diet. But all in all, when we are looking at making any changes to our food choices for the better to improve our health, you always ask yourself the question, right? How can I start to make some changes to my current meals and snacks that work to increase fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and those legumes that we were just talking about? So it doesn't have to be complicated. It is important to start small with these changes, especially when we haven't done the DASH diet before. Making some of those small changes can be simply as easy as making maybe just 2 changes in the week. And maybe it's something like you typically have chicken salad at lunchtime, but it literally is just chicken and mayo. How can I get some fruits or vegetables in that, right? Can I add some apples, some grapes, some celery or green onion into that chicken salad to increase my potassium from those fruits and vegetables? If I'm making scrambled eggs for myself in the morning, instead of just eggs and toast, could I throw in some sauteed vegetables, like maybe some mushrooms or some spinach into my scrambled eggs? Could I put some no added sugar peanut butter on my toast to increase the potassium from that nut source too? So just think about how you can make those simple changes to the things you're already eating in your meals and snacks to be more DASH friendly as you're continuing to work on these changes. So that is my overview of the DASH diet. Now I want to hear from you guys. So the next few slides, I'm going to be picking your guys' brain. So here you have on the screen a picture of a breakfast. And I want to know from you guys, how would you make this breakfast to be more of a DASH friendly option now that we've kind of heard about what the DASH diet is? So what you're seeing on the screen is some hard eggs, you've got bacon, there's white toast, and then there is some butter on that toast. So what are some ideas that you have to make this breakfast more DASH friendly? So I'll let you guys go ahead and type that in the chat. It's not going to be a poll question, but go ahead and type that into the chat for us. All right, very good. So we've got some answers coming into the chat now. And somebody is suggesting to swap out that bacon, which is generally a sodium and saturated fat choice, with a apple or a fruit. I guess look at me, I'm choosing apple, but you said fruit. Using a turkey bacon instead of the pork bacon, adding avocado to the toast, cooking those eggs without any salt and maybe using another spice, just like we talked about, maybe some garlic powder or some black pepper. So somebody says maybe 1 toast, 1 egg, so decreasing portions. And the orange juice is not fully showing, but is a good one. That's good. I actually never even recognized that orange juice sitting in the background there. So good catch. turkey bacon, whole wheat bread, scrambled eggs with vegetables. She's keeping the butter, she says. That is fair. Adding tomatoes and half the toast. Replace white toast with whole grain. Okay, very good. So, all right. And I also had some ideas, which would have been like 1 egg, adding the sauteed vegetables, which I heard into the chat, whole grain toast with maybe some of that peanut butter on top, and then a side of berries. Or maybe some whole grain toast, adding some avocado on top of that. And then maybe instead of eggs, we do a protein source from Greek yogurt. So we can get some dairy in there with some diced apples and maybe a sprinkle of cinnamon on top. Or maybe we turn this breakfast into like a breakfast burrito, right? We could do a scrambled egg with our sauteed vegetables, throw in some black beans or even some sweet potatoes. That's very good breakfast choice as well. Throw that into a whole grain tortilla. You got yourself a breakfast burrito and an apple on the side. So just some additional suggestions there. And then we get a question about egg replacers. That is a fine option, honestly. It really just cuts down on the saturated fat. That's a fine option. Okay. Here are some tips to add in more fruit. I think we have had some really good ideas on how to increase our fruit. Fruit is an easy thing to add as part of a snack. Dice up some apples on top of yogurt or oatmeal. Throw some blueberries onto maybe your bowl of cereal or your Greek yogurt. So it's not just plain Greek yogurt, but you get a fruit choice there too. If you're doing a salad, maybe you think things like a spinach salad with some diced chicken on top, and then you throw some berries and some slivered almonds. So you also get one of your nut sources for the week, and you're increasing your fruit. Just some additional suggestions on how to add more fruit into your meals and snacks. So then let's move on to lunch. So what you're seeing on the screen here is your typical restaurant hamburger and French fries, which we know probably comes with quite a bit of saturated fat, depending upon the hamburger choice, the fryer oil. We probably have a lot of sodium from the bun and the French fries. So what ideas do you guys have then to make a meal like this, or maybe eating out for lunchtime, a DASH-friendly choice? What changes would you make here? So we've got some options coming in for a DASH-friendly lunch. Somebody is suggesting maybe a turkey or a black bean burger on a whole wheat bun with a side salad instead of French fries. Somebody's suggesting a lettuce wrap turkey burger, a black bean burger without the bun or a whole wheat bun. Maybe if you're eating at home, you have that option to have a whole wheat bun instead. A side salad or some low-fat cottage cheese on the side. I like that. Thank you for bringing in the dairy choice into this lunch option. And then somebody says maybe a side salad or fruit. Absolutely. And so somebody also says veggie sticks instead of French fries. And sometimes we have control over that, absolutely. If we are maybe eating in a cafeteria and maybe not off of a menu, or if we're eating at home. You guys had very similar suggestions to me. I think one of the things that I was also thinking in looking at that side salad choices that you were talking about, making sure to use an oil-based salad dressing like a vinaigrette, so we get those heart-healthy oils into the mix of that conversation. We also think about looking at the menu maybe at our lunch restaurant and doing, this isn't perfect, and it never is when you go out to eat, right? But maybe like a grilled chicken sandwich or just a grilled chicken breast with some steamed broccoli or some green beans. Reminder that you can ask for those options, with no added salt on them when you order them at the table. So just some additional suggestions there. And then before we move on to dinner, Just some thoughts on increasing more vegetables into our diet. And again, if you guys have additional suggestions on ways to get more veggies in an easy way, please feel free to add those to the chat. These are just my suggestions. I really do love like bowls. So you're thinking like a grain bowl, which can really hit a lot of the items that the DASH diet recommends more of because you've got your whole grain, right? So maybe you've got your brown rice, your wild rice, your quinoa, maybe you're using bulgur, some other whole grain, and that's kind of like the base of your bowl. But then you can add in some, some grilled chicken that we talked about earlier. Maybe we're throwing our black beans or our garbanzo beans on it, and you can just load that bowl up with all the different types of vegetables. You can get so many different servings into like a bowl type option. Adding, we oftentimes get kind of stuck when we're doing like sandwiches or wraps or burgers, and we forget to just sneak those vegetables in on those options that we might be already having. Salad, very similar to a grain bowl, right? You can get lots of different servings of vegetables all at one time in just one salad. And then one of my personal favorite recipes are these tuna boats, which can really sneak in a few different DASH diet elements in. And so this is a canned tuna, which we know is a good potassium source. It also gets us that fatty fish that is recommended 2 to 3 times per week. And instead of using a mayo or a Miracle Whip here, this is using a mixture of a white bean, like a cannellini bean, which is a softer white bean that is mashed up with a little olive oil, Dijon mustard. Obviously, be very mindful with your salt choices there, but you can add some pepper. You mash that in, you mix in the tuna. You can throw that into like a tuna boat or a zucchini or a pepper or a tomato, and that can be a really satisfying DASH-friendly lunch option too. All right, and then last but not least, if looking at this steak with a loaded baked potato, how would you make this dinner more DASH friendly? So I'll give you guys a minute to type in that in the chat. How would you make this dinner more DASH friendly? We've got steak and loaded baked potato. A couple of you guys answering here. All right, so we said order chicken instead. That would decrease the saturated fat. Yes, side salad and steamed broccoli. Okay, perfect. Add broccoli, swap sour cream for Greek yogurt, and season with non-salt seasonings. Absolutely. When we go and we dine out, keep in mind that when we're trying to decrease our sodium, when we eat out at restaurants, it can be a little bit more challenging to stay under our sodium recommendations because there's just so much salt in the restaurants. But keep in mind that if you're going to a large franchise restaurant, their nutrition facts information is available on the website, so you can kind of pre-plan, but always remember that you can ask for these items to be cooked and prepared without the extra salt. All right, very good. Good suggestions, you guys. All right, let's see what else we have here. Tips to reduce salt and sodium. And so we talked about reading labels, of course, choosing packaged and canned items that are no salt atoms, no salt added specifically, or that say reduced sodium. Remember that, using, I'm always promoting beans, but I purchase beans in a can, right, for the sake of convenience. And we know that looking at some of those canned bean and vegetable options, they have a lot of sodium. So make sure to drain them and rinse them off, and that can reduce your sodium content by about 40%. Bread, tortillas, pita breads, whatever type of bread option you might be using, keep in mind that those are big contributors to sodium as well. But there are some low sodium bread options out there, like a sprouted bread. For instance, Ezekiel 4-9, it's a frozen bread in the freezer sections there at most of our larger grocery stores. They have a low sodium choice, which actually has no sodium in there. So there are some sodium-free breads. You guys did such a good job in identifying sodium-free seasonings. All of your seasonings, like garlic and onion powder. Somebody had the thought in the chat. They would like more information on more sodium-free seasonings. So really anything that doesn't use salt in its name, right? So onion powder, garlic powder, cumin, oregano, but you can look at your ingredient list on those too, because some of those can be tricky. I have gotten stumped by buying lemon pepper in the past and come to find out that had quite a bit of salt in it. So always do the due diligence and look at those nutrition facts labels. Some DASH-friendly snack ideas. Things like a low-fat string cheese and some berries, or a banana and some peanut butter. And how do we get more beans into our diet? If you haven't already tried roasted chickpeas, highly recommend. You can make those at home by yourself. You can purchase those already packaged in the store. Obviously, be mindful of what seasoning you're getting, because that can have a significant contributor of sodium. But if you're doing those at home, you can season them with your own cayenne pepper. I heard that suggestion in the chat, and they make a very delicious, crunchy, heart-healthy snack choice that would be perfect on the DASH diet. And then just some additional ideas to decrease our saturated fat. Now that this specifically impacts the blood pressure, but it does impact our heart health in general. And I did see the comment in the chat about some of you guys keeping your butter choices, and that is okay. There's also those recommended products that have the butter and olive oil together. So you're getting, yes, some of that buttery flavor, but you're also getting more unsaturated fat because it does have some olive oil blended into that as well. So I won't go over all of those, but I want to leave you guys with these resources, and I'm going to add these to the chat. I realize it's 1 o'clock. I'm going to add these resources to the chat so you can click on them and look at them in the future and after our class today. These are resources such as eatingwell.com, which I highly recommend if you're looking for blood pressure friendly recipes. And then some of those other resources, as I mentioned, were from the National Institutes of Health to just do more information on the DASH diet, especially when it comes to like grocery shopping, what to put on your shopping list, some very helpful resources there. And then if you've got a minute to stick around, I realize it's 1 o'clock, so thank you guys for sticking around. But if you've got a minute longer to stick around and answer my question here, I would love to hear what is one thing that you learned today about the DASH diet that you plan to use in the coming week to better your blood pressure. So go ahead and type that in the chat if you've got a minute. All right, we've got white beans in place of mayo. I like that. It is quite tasty. People are so surprised when they look at that recipe and realize there's no mayonnaise in it. Okay, very good. Yes, the potassium level goal is a good reminder. We in America don't tend to get as much potassium as we should, and that just puts us even over a little bit more. Reading our nutrition facts labels and checking sodium before you buy something, very important. So thank you guys so much for sharing that. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a great day. If you have any questions, I'm sure feel free to reach out to HelpNet and they will get you connected to me, and I'd be happy to answer any additional questions today. So thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of your day.